Greetings, Taku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you all my review of Captain America Civil War right here on Otaku Assemble. Weekly, and finally here to bring you all a new movie review. It seems like forever since the last time I've done one. Now, I do want to take this time to go ahead and apologize for the delay with this review. Originally, this was intended to be a live hangout that I was going to do this past weekend, but that hangout was also going to consist of a speculations and expectations discussion on the Marvel Phase 3 film. So, in the interest of not spoiling anything for any of my viewers who have yet to see this film, I decided to go ahead and break it up into two videos. The first will be my review of Captain America Civil War, and then the second will be that Marvel Phase 3 discussion live hangout. So keep an eye out for that. Also, in the interest of not spoiling anything for those of you all who have yet to see this film, I will be doing this review in two parts. The first part will be spoiler-free, and then the second part will be spoiler-filled. I'll go into a little bit more detail with a couple of topics and a couple of things about the film specifically, but I will let you all know when we get into the spoiler portion of this review. So, kicking things off, Captain America Civil War is a sequel to both Captain America Winter Soldier and Avengers Age of Ultron. The story takes place a year after the events of Age of Ultron, during which time Cap is leading the new Avengers team that we saw assembled at the end of that film, and he and Falcon have also been continuing their search for Bucky. Now, in this film kicks off with an incident that finally causes the United Nations to step in and decide to regulate the Avengers. And so, of course, they pass an act in which each team member has to sign. This starts to sort of separate the team, as has been foreshadowed in the trailer. But once Bucky has been discovered, and once a worldwide manhunt is issued to bring Bucky in, this is the event that finally splits the team in two. On the one hand, we have Tony and his team who are trying to apprehend Bucky and bring him in, and by extension, apprehend Captain America and his team. Why? Because what start out as them trying to bring Bucky in themselves so that he's brought in safely and most importantly alive, turns into a quest to sort of uncover some mysteries that get presented in the film. Now, I won't go into too much detail about what these mysteries are. That's for you all to check out for yourselves if you haven't seen this film yet. But in Cap's quest to sort of protect Bucky during this period of time, that makes him and his team fugitives. And so that is what ends up splitting our team into two parts. Now, that's as brief as a synopsis as I can give about the film without giving anything away. Like I said, I won't go into too much detail about it just because if you haven't seen it yet, it really was an experience to see on screen. And I mean, it was a phenomenal film. So, let's go ahead and let's kick things off first talking about the writing. This is the same creative team, the same writers, and the same directors that gave us Captain America Winter Soldier, and this is also the same team that's currently signed on to do both Avengers Infinity Wars. Now, the writing in this film I think is top-notch. I think this was some really well done work. Now, I've already heard it said from other critics that have considered this to be the best Marvel Studios film yet. And I can't necessarily jump on that bandwagon just yet, just because, you know, I've only seen this film one time. So I'd have to go back and rewatch it a couple of times before I could really make that assessment. But in terms of the story itself, I would go ahead and say it is one of the best screenplays for a Marvel Studio film. I would probably put it right up there with Winter Soldier and with Guardians of the Galaxy. It is really good. Number one, and this was the biggest thing I was looking forward to, and I'm glad that it paid off. Number one, the story in this film is actually better than the source material because this film is inspired by the Civil War event in the Marvel Comics that ran in, I want to say it was late 2006, early 2007. This is actually much better than that event. This is much better than the source material. I've discussed about the art of adaptation on my channel before, how when you adapt something, it's not always it's not always best to go ahead and follow the source material to the letter. Sometimes you do have to make changes, and sometimes you do have to adapt the material in a way that will fit into the medium in which you're doing so. And so to say that not only is this being adapted into a film, but it's also being adapted as the next chapter of this overarching story that we're getting in the MCU, I think it blew that out of the water. I think it did a fantastic job in doing so. I'm also impressed how, while many might get the misconception that it's an Avengers film, no, it still very much is a Captain America film. He is still the lead protagonist. He is still the main focus. And the fact that Bucky is sort of the driving factor throughout the story, that he's sort of the linchpin in this entire conflict, that also more makes it a Captain America film. And I think they did a good job at doing that. I think the dialogue was really well done. I'm surprised how well they actually managed all of the different characters that are in this film, because that was an early concern that I read about the film, was that there may be too many characters in it. But no, I think they did a pretty good job, because, you know, some characters of course have more screen time than others, but that's to be expected because those characters play a bigger role in the story. So the fact that the fact that Falcon has more screen time than Hawkeye, well, that makes sense, because Falcon is directly tied into this conflict more so than Hawkeye is. Or the fact that, you know, we get very little Ant-Man, but we get much more Scarlet Witch. That makes perfect sense given the plot of the film. So even that, I think, was done really, really well. Now I want to go ahead and I want to move on to the acting. The acting is what we would expect for this. Everybody plays their character like they have been. They all do a fantastic job at it. And any issue that I would find with a character in this film has nothing to do with the acting. It has more to do with the writing. Now, once again, as I just mentioned, the writing is fantastic. I don't have too many issues with some characters. There are some I wish I had seen more, given a bigger role they could have played in the conflict. But, you know, we're just talking about personal preference at that point. But the acting is pretty good. Now, in terms of the newcomers to this film, because of course this is the introduction of Black Panther, and this is also the introduction of the new Spider-Man. Now I will say this, number one, Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther. You know, this was a role I was ecstatic about, because I've been waiting to see Black Panther on screen. But number two, when I found out that it was Chadwick Boseman, I was like, oh my God, well, that dude's, you know, he's phenomenal. He's going to blow it out the water. Suffices to say, my faith was rewarded, because every moment he was on camera, I couldn't help but, you know, smile from ear to ear. He does a fantastic job as T'Challa. I cannot stress to you all how excited I am for the standalone Black Panther movie that we're getting in 2 years, I believe. Like, he just knocked that out of the park, man. Fantastic job. Now, Tom Holland coming on board as the new Spider-Man. I have mixed feelings on him, but it's not necessarily the way in which he was written, nor is it the way in which Holland portrays Spider-Man. It's more so just certain things that they're doing with this character that I personally don't like. So it's more of a taste issue, but I can't necessarily say that it's objectively bad. Also because it's a little bit too early to say about Spider-Man. You know, he does have a small role in this film. I don't know if any of you all who have yet to see this expected him to play a much bigger role. But no, he has a somewhat small role, and it's clear that in his scenes in this film, they were really just using this as the launching pad for his solo films. And on one hand, I do think he was kind of shoehorned in, but on the other hand, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with the move that, you know, to incorporate him in this film. Now, let's go ahead and let's talk about the cinematography and some of the special effects. Now, the cinematography in this film is really well done. I especially was impressed by how well the close-ups were done during the hand-to-hand combat scenes, because especially for an example like the scene with Bucky and Tony fighting, and you all might have seen it from the trailer or from the commercial, where Tony's just, all he has is his Iron Man hand and he's fighting, he's in his suit. Like that scene, how quickly that choreography is done, and the fact that a lot of those shots are like right over the shoulder, like you're right here, almost as if, you know, we're seeing what Tony is seeing during this fight, or we're seeing what Bucky's is seeing. Like those types of shots throughout the film, I was really impressed by how well those were done. More often than not, you know, those shots are really sticky. They're really hard to land, and I think the cinematographer did a really good job at doing those. In terms of the special effects, I think most of the special effects were really well done. I will say this though, there was one CG effect that I was actually surprised wasn't done as well as it could have been, because it's somewhat of a simple effect and it's one we've seen done multiple times. Now I won't say exactly what it is because it is one of the major surprises of the film, but that whole CG effect, I'm like, this could have been so much better. That could have been done much better than it was. But besides that, most of it I think was well done. My only real complaint about the cinematography in this film, when they do the establishing shots, whenever we change location, they put the name, the title of the location in big, bold, white letters across the entire screen. I've seen that done before. Like I know Viceland, the network, if any of you all have seen that network, or if any of you all have seen the television show, which originally I believe was on HBO. Like if you ever seen that show, they'll do that with their locations. You know, they'll do like Detroit in big bold white letters, or Chicago in big bold white letters. They do that in this film. I don't care for that. I really don't. And I've seen more and more people do this. Here's the thing. Look, okay, like it seems like they're trying to make it this stylistic trend, and to me personally, I think that just distracts from the landscape establishing shot that you're trying to give us with this new location. You know, and also I can't help but think that sort of contributes to this whole idea of, oh, people have short attention spans. They wouldn't necessarily pay attention to the title of the location in small print at the bottom, or they might miss it. So we need to put it in big bold letters so that they'll catch it. You got to give your audience more credit than that. You really do. So that whole, like, I've never cared for those shots, and I've never really cared for the defense of them. Next, I want to talk about the music. The scores in this film are fantastic. And if you want to talk about how a score can influence the emotional feel of a scene, I mean, there are multiple points in this film where that score is very much so informing you, this is how you're supposed to feel about this scene. You know, especially like in the tense moments, the anticipation, what they do with those, in some of those scores with those chords, how, you know, that volume is slowly getting louder and louder, or the drums, you know, pounding when it's like, yeah, this is an intense moment. Like that the music really does sell. I think it does half of the work in terms of the storytelling in this film. I think it really does. My only complaint, this film doesn't really have much of a soundtrack. Because I stayed until the end of the credits, of course, which is a ritual with Marvel films nowadays. You make sure you stay all the way to the end, but also that's to give respect and show acknowledgement for the people who worked on the film. You know, I'm one of those people. I've done many shoots as a production grip. So, you know, I like to go ahead and find out, hey, who are the grips that worked on this film? Who's the key grip? Who's the gaffer? You know, I want to know that stuff. But by the end of the credits, when they list the music tracks that were in the film, there were only like 6. Not much of a soundtrack. So that's probably my only real complaint about the music. But then again, with the scores that we got, you didn't really need any additional music to be in the film. Now, I hope at some point I do run across a full-blown soundtrack for this film, because I can only imagine the type of tracks that you would find on it. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and give my final overall thoughts on the film before I go ahead and jump into the spoiler portion of this review. Final thoughts on the film, Captain America Civil War. Every expectation that I had for this film was met. A few of them even exceeded. Now, in terms of whether or not it's the best Marvel Studios film, I can't make that call just yet. But I would definitely say it's one of the best. If nothing else, definitely top 5. Definitely top 5. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend seeing it. Yeah. Fantastic film. Fantastic film. So, Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump into the spoiler-filled portion of this review. So, if you haven't seen the film yet, and you've been watching this review, you are being warned now. Go check it out before you watch this portion of the review, unless you don't mind spoilers. So a few things I want to talk about now that we're into the spoiler-filled portion of this review. Okay, first and foremost, I mentioned in the spoiler-free portion about how I thought all the characters were written well and I thought the acting was done well, but there were a few characters that I thought should have played a bigger role in the story. The one character that I meant by that, the main one I think she really should have had a much bigger role, was Scarlet Witch. And the reason why I say that is because, now I'm assuming that you guys have seen this film if you're watching this part of the review. Here's the thing. Scarlet Witch, it was her actions in that mission that opened the film that was the, the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of the UN deciding that they needed to regulate the Avengers, right? Also, as we saw with now Secretary of State Thunderbolt Ross, he's no longer a general apparently, these last 8 years he got that promotion. Anyway, when Ross was lecturing the team, he brought up, what happened in Age of Ultron and whatnot, what happened to that country and whatnot, and we know that was the entire motivation behind Zemo, his whole revenge plot. Here's the thing though, Scarlet Witch was there. She belongs to that country. She's a native to that country. Hell, she lost a brother in that conflict. So for her to sort of, like take this blame and not really stand up for herself. And then now we know eventually she ended up standing up for herself when Hawkeye went ahead and busted her out of house arrest. But still, like, I wish she had been written to be much more vocal and much more opinionated about the entire matter, because I think that what has happened, these catastrophes that the Avengers are being blamed for causing, I think she's been one of the biggest victims of that. And they seem to kind of gloss over that. They wrote her as if she's almost like this loose cannon. I mean, for all intent and purpose, that could have very well have been Bruce Banner in that same situation. If we were still dealing with the original team, then they would have been talking about Banner the way they were talking about Wanda. And so, no, that is one complaint I did have about that film. I think Wanda, especially because Scarlet Witch does have that personality in the comics. Now, granted, they might be writing her a tad bit different in the films. Also, they have not established in the films that her power is directly infused with her emotions. They haven't explicitly said that in the films. It's hinted at, that her emotions controls her abilities, but they haven't explicitly said that. So because of that, I don't think there was really a good enough reason for her not to be assertive, not to assert herself more, because it's not like she's having to keep her powers in check, if you know what I mean. Okay. So I mentioned briefly how I had mixed feelings about Spider-Man and about his portrayal in the film. So I'll touch on that a little bit. And this is what I mean when I said that. Here's the thing. Once again, I don't think he was written poorly, nor do I think he was portrayed poorly. I think Holland actually did a pretty fair job for what they want this Spider-Man to be. My problem with it, though, is that this Spider-Man, he's written as a teenager, but even beyond that, he's written as a millennial. He's written as a present-day teenager, because remember, all these films take place in present day. So he's written as a 15-year-old right now in 2016. He is written as a kid who was born in 2001, okay? For all intent and purpose, this Peter was in diapers when the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man came out. And the thing is, I'm not trying to knock millennials necessarily, nor am I trying to knock teenagers necessarily, because you all, those of you all who are teenagers right now, you're my second biggest audience on this channel. I'm not trying to knock you guys, don't take this the wrong way. But I personally I've found it difficult to be able to relate to teenagers nowadays, which is kind of funny because I'm only 26 years old, guys, okay? I'm 9 years older. I'm sorry, 11. I'm 11 years older than Peter is in this film, okay? So, Oh well, shit. Well, now that I said that, that makes me damn near twice his age, because I'll be 27 next month. But anyway, so but my thing is, like, I've always had a difficulty sort of relating with that demographic, and so the fact that they give him traits and little quirks that a lot of people contribute to millennials and teenagers nowadays, it was a bit of a turnoff. Also, there are a couple of elements from the Ultimate Spider-Man animated series that they are incorporating into this portrayal. I can already see it. The fact that we have Marissa Tomei playing Aunt May, so we're doing the whole old Peter has a hot aunt gag, which they do on the show. The whole old Tony hooked Peter up with everything that made him, the current Spider-Man, if you will. That they did that on, I think they did that in the 6th episode of Ultimate Spider-Man. We're doing that in the film. And the fact that his web shooter now has this built-in technology, this Spidey technology, even the logo they use for that. Like, I know they've incorporated that in the comics recently, but that's also in that animated series. And the thing is, I don't care for that animated series. I don't care for the way Peter is portrayed in that series. So the fact that they are working in some of those elements from that show, once again, guys, is a turnoff. Now, like I said, nothing about it is necessarily objectively bad. I'll have to wait until the standalone Spider-Man film comes out to actually make a fair assessment of that. What we're talking about is a taste issue. And I personally don't care for those elements to be attributed to this Spider-Man. So let's see, other spoiler portions. Okay, remember what I said about that CGI effect that just didn't work? Okay, Ant-Man, when he turned into Giant Man, I was like, dude, that was so awesome. But the effects on that, I'm like, how many times have we done enlarged or giant people on camera now? Some of that CG was sloppy, and I was shocked by that. I'm like, come on, you guys can come better than that. I know you can, because I've seen you do it, right? Yeah, some of that CG with Paul Rudd when he enlarged himself into Giant Man, yeah, some of that didn't really work. No thoughts, talking spoilers about the film. I will say this, like, I just ran across an article online that talked about the the big plot twist for Captain America Civil War. Here's the thing though, that plot twist I think was actually delivered very well. But you know what made that plot twist so good was the fact that it was already foreshadowed to. That plot twist was foreshadowed twice in Captain America Winter Soldier. If you go back to that, so, when it was revealed that Bucky was the one who killed Tony's parents, like, I wasn't shocked by that. Were any of you all shocked by that? Because once again, I remembered what they mentioned in Winter Soldier, but apparently a lot of people was. And I remember in the theater hearing the and I'm like, really? Seriously? Like, that got y'all? I mean, once again, I'm not saying it was bad. I'm just saying I found it funny that, they sort of made this into this huge big plot twist when I'm like, once again, the reason why it works is because we've already had enough evidence to suggest that something like that would have happened. So I think, all in all, I think they did a pretty good job on that. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up my review of Captain America Civil War. I want to thank you all for joining me again this week. In the comments below, leave your thoughts on this film and let me know what some of your speculations, expectations, and theories for the upcoming slate of Marvel Phase 3 films are. But if you like this review, please feel free to thumb it up, share it with other people, other fans of this film, other people who who are still trying to decide whether or not to see this film, and anyone you think would enjoy my review. And if you have yet to do so, subscribe to the OAW YouTube channel. Annotation is above head. And with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. I'm signing off, and until next time, peace.